Hello and welcome to Devil's Advocate in the second part of this special double series with the former Prime Minister of Pakistan, Benazir Bhutto. In part one, I talked to her about the Charter of Democracy she's just signed and what it means for Pakistan, for the restoration of democracy and her own future. Today, I shall ask her what the Charter of Democracy means for relations with India and the Kashmir dispute. Ms. Bhutto, Clause 17 of the Charter of Democracy that came into effect on the 2nd of July says that peaceful relations with India will be pursued without prejudice to outstanding disputes. How does that differ from General Musharraf's India policy?
Well, General Musharraf at the moment has been unable to control the militancy, and unfortunately, when we had the earthquake in Azad Kashmir, we saw that the militant groups totally resurfaced.
Would you be better at it?
I believe so. I believe that the insurgency was much better controlled during the time of democratic governments.
The insurgency began, in fact, in 1990 when you were in power.
It began actually in 1988.
Well,
when
1989 actually.
In 1990 I was overthrown.
Let me ask you what many Indians remember. Millions remember the young Prime Minister in her 30s who would shout on television, Azadi, Azadi, Azadi. Is that now a thing of the past?
I do believe in freedom and the right of self-determination, and I believe people of Kashmir must determine their own future. However, at the same time, I believe that relations with India cannot be kept hostage to the Kashmir dispute. And if there is a lack of progress on agenda item number 1, which is Kashmir, it doesn't mean that there should be a lack of progress on agenda item number 2, which is Indo-Pak relations.
This is very interesting. I noticed that, in fact, the manner and description of Kashmir in the Charter of Democracy does not use the critical phrase so fondly used by General Musharraf, the core issue. Is that deliberate or is it an oversight?
Well, Kashmir is obviously a core issue for every single Pakistani, but the issue is how to deal with it. There are nations who have conflicts, but it doesn't mean that their relations go down the drain. For example, India and China have a conflict, but Indian and Chinese relations still remain good. So we've got to agree that we have got a dispute in Kashmir, but we must not prevent that from developing Indo-Pak relations. And obviously, unless we can control militancy and prevent militants holding our relations hostage.
I'll come to militancy in a moment's time, but you just indicated something, and I'm getting you to underline it, that when you use the phrase core issue, although I repeat again, it's not in your Charter of Democracy, you mean something very different to what General Musharraf does.
That's right.
You're saying, we're not going to get hung up on Kashmir. We're not going to let it become an obstacle.
Lack of progress.
Lack of progress on Kashmir doesn't mean there can't be progress on other issues in other areas.
Very well
So you'd be happy to proceed on trade, visas, sporting contacts, and a whole lot of other areas.
I believe it's essential for us to proceed on trade. The world is dividing into economic trading blocks, and the people of the subcontinent can only have a better future if we can work together.
Will a future Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto give India most favoured nation status?
Well, I don't...
You refused it, by the way, when you were first in power.
Okay, I don't remember the most favoured nation, but I can tell you that in 1988, when we had the SAARC summit, I proposed to all the SAARC leaders, including Rajiv Gandhi, Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi, that we should have a South Asian preferential tariff agreement.
Which has come into being.
Which then came into being, and in my second term, I ratified it, because I've always felt that SAARC should be more than a cultural association.
So you will boost trade with India?
Bilkul. I mean, yes.
Regardless of the fact that there may not be progress on Kashmir. It won't be an obstacle to trade.
It would be unfortunate if there's no progress on Kashmir, but it won't be an obstacle to trade.
Let's then come back to the Charter of Democracy.
Or to a South Asian economic union, which I believe is very essential.
Okay, let's come back to the Charter of Democracy. Clause 18 says the Kashmir dispute should be settled in accordance with the UN resolutions. Now, today, when General Musharraf has repeatedly said that he's prepared to move, Pakistan is prepared to move beyond the UN resolutions, why are you harking back to them?
Well, and the consensus in Pakistan is that the UN resolution should be adhered to. Of course, it's...
Where do you find out that this is the consensus? Your newspapers suggest something else.
Well, General Musharraf's proposals to do away with the UN Security Council resolutions do not really have a widespread backing.
Can I point out, you were the leader who in the last 3 years spoke about open borders, free trade. You even spoke about joint parliaments today after signing the Charter of Democracy, when you believe that in fact you're somewhere near returning to power. You've gone back on your own beliefs.
No, we haven't gone back on our beliefs. We believe that the Kashmir dispute should be settled in accordance with the United Nations resolutions. We don't believe that we in Pakistan can dictate to the Kashmiris what their future ought to be.
So just to be clear, you're saying that in fact the resolution of Kashmir has to be in terms of the UN Security Council resolutions?
That's what international law says,
No,
yes.
yeah, leave international law aside. Is that what Benazir Bhutto is saying?
That's the PPP position.
That is the PPP
and
position.
it is the position
and
of the
things
ARD.
that you said in the last
It is the position of the ARD too.
It is the position of the ARD too. But things that Benazir Bhutto said in the last 2-3 years, talking about joint parliaments, which was rare and novel, you've now revoked and gone back on.
No. I believe that all of us have to work together. I've not revoked that. I stand by that. And I've just explained to you that we have to...
You can't stand by both things at the same time.
Yes, you can.
Because one is an attempt to move away from the rigidity of UN resolutions and find new solutions. You can't have both new solutions and the old solution sitting side by side.
But until a new solution is found, there will be an old solution.
So the old solution is a fail-safe, safe back in case the new solution is never found. It's like a safety net under the experiment of the new one.
You can call it a safety net, but until the Kashmiri people decide on a view that is different than that contained in the UN Security Council resolutions, it would not be appropriate for the PPP or Pakistan to do that.
All right, if I think I've understood you correctly...
So I think there ought to be track 2 talks, and if through track 2 talks or through negotiations...
Oh, we're talking about track 1 talks now. This is no longer track 2.
Okay, track 1. If a solution is found by the Kashmiri people, that's for them. But I'm not able to say that we're going to do away with the UN resolutions in the absence of any solution that is found.
Let me put it like this. I'm not myself sure whether what you're talking about is a state of confusion or whether it's a state of extreme cleverness. Let's leave that aside. Let me instead put to you the 3 parameters.
But you should clear what you think.
Let me put to you the 3 parameters that General Musharraf enunciated in India in April 2005 as guideposts for a solution. They were warmly welcomed by the Indian government. They were warmly welcomed by the Indian people. And I enunciate them to you. Boundaries cannot be altered. The LOC cannot be a permanent boundary. And boundaries must be made irrelevant. Do you stand by that line of approach?
I've not been taken into confidence by General Musharraf on the Kashmir issue.
But these were publicly said.
They were publicly said, but we've not been taken into confidence in the parliament.
But you read about them in the papers. You must have heard about them in commentaries. Do you stand by this line of approach?
We read many things in the papers, but our policy is that we stand by the Simla Agreement, and we stand on a 2 agenda item.
All that the Simla Agreement says is that, in fact, the issue will be resolved bilaterally. Actually, the UN resolutions could be an exception to the Simla Agreement, not a furtherance of it. So once again, there could be confusion.
I wish to avoid causing confusion, but I wish to state that there is a 2 agenda item that was agreed upon between the People's Government in 1993 and Foreign Secretary Dixit, who was at the Cyprus conference, and that 2 item agenda was 1 agenda item on Kashmir and 1 on Indo-Pak relations. And as far as we are concerned, the Indo-Pak relations should not be stalled because of lack of progress on the Kashmir issue.
And that is commendable.
And as far as we are concerned, as far as we are concerned, the UN Security Council resolutions stand in the field until and if the Kashmiri people arrive at an alternative.
All right. The Kashmiri people, I'm talking about Omar Abdullah, I'm talking about Mirwais Omar Farooq, I'm talking about Mehbooba Mufti, strenuously endorsed a concept that General Musharraf enunciated first on this program in January when he spoke about self-governance and joint management of Kashmir. It was warmly welcomed by people in Kashmir as an idea that could actually provide a solution. Do you think that that is worth exploring, and will you continue to explore it if you come to power?
Well, they are the Kashmiri leaders, and it is for them through an intra-Kashmiri dialogue to try and make a proposal.
But what is the position of Benazir Bhutto? You could be, you claim, the next Prime Minister of Pakistan. I'm asking you for clarity on Kashmir. Instead, what I'm getting, forgive me, is a mishmash of different positions going back 10 and 12 years in time, and a certain confusion.
I am 10 or 12 years behind. I'm not involved in the present peace process.
You mean you need time to catch up?
I need time to catch up. I can give you the overall framework, which I believe I have done, but I need time to catch up.
Can I put something to you? Many people who hear you today will say, 3 years ago, she sounded novel, she sounded exciting, she was talking about open borders, she was talking about free trade, she was talking about shared parliaments, which was a striking concept. Today, by going back to the UN resolutions, she sounds hardline. Worse, she's becoming hardline as General Musharraf is becoming accommodating.
I would disagree with that. I would disagree with that view.
You're disillusioning people in India.
It's not my wish to disillusion people in India or in Pakistan, but I do wish to state that I believe in open borders, and I believe in safe and open borders, and this is what I have been proposing by creating a South Asian Economic Union.
My last question before we take the commercial break. Many people in India believe that in fact the army is the right person and party with which a solution to Kashmir can be worked out. When they listen to your prevarication or confusion or the way you've shifted your position,
I've not shifted my position. You are saying I've shifted my position. I have not shifted my position. And it would be a great disservice for you to convey that impression. I have stated very clearly what my position is. I and my party are the authors of the safe and open borders policy with India. We are the people who have proposed SAPTA, and we believe that the future of South Asia lies in coming together in a European Union.
But at the same time, you're also going back to the UN resolutions.
We are not prepared to abandon the UN resolutions at this particular point of time.
You're running two horses together.
I'm not running two horses together. You understand perfectly well that there's no alternative, and you understand perfectly well what I have given is a fair and accurate account of our policies. And I don't believe the people of India would be disillusioned, because I think the people of India want to move ahead. And under General Musharraf, they haven't been able to move ahead.
Let's take a break at that point. Let's come back and talk about the Charter of Democracy and the message it sends out regarding terror. As you know, Tuesday was a terrible day in India. What message does Benazir Bhutto have to give to the people of India after last Tuesday? That's the subject in part 2. See you in a moment's time. Welcome back to the second part of this exclusive interview with the former Prime Minister of Pakistan, Benazir Bhutto. Ms. Bhutto, the clause number 26 of your Charter of Democracy says terrorism and militancy are strongly condemned and will be vigorously confronted. Does this include the terrorism inflicted on India by Pakistan-based terrorist groups, many of whom are financed and supported by the Pakistan government?
That's many questions.
Just give me a simple yes.
The issue here is of fighting terrorism and militancy. And I feel deeply pained, as do many people in Pakistan, over the tragic events that took place in Bombay. Of course, no connection has been made with Pakistan, and there may be none. But nonetheless,
connections have been made, forgive me, to the Lashkar-e-Toiba almost indisputably, and no one doubts it. Lashkar-e-Toiba is based in Pakistan. Lashkar-e-Toiba is perhaps funded by the Pakistan government. It's certainly protected by the Pakistan government.
Certainly, Lashkar-e-Toiba is a militant group, and it's a group that General Musharraf said he had banned. And if Lashkar-e-Toiba is behind these blasts, it shows that General Musharraf has failed, despite 7 years in power, in undermining the groups that wreak havoc.
Can I ask the lady in front of me, who could be the future third Prime Minister for the third time of Pakistan, 3 critical test questions. If you become Prime Minister of Pakistan again, will groups like the Lashkar, the Jaish, the Hizbul, the Harkatul Mujahideen, the Al-Badr be closed down?
Yes.
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
There's no qualification.
No.
They will be closed down.
They will be closed down with myself, if the Constitution gives me the chief executive powers. Because at the moment, the Prime Minister does not have the powers of the chief executive.
If you have
they lie with the President. But if I have the powers, yes, I believe that such groups are undermining Pakistan's integrity. I believe such groups are giving Pakistan a bad name. And I believe such groups are endangering Pakistan's very existence.
What about men like Masood Azhar and Hafiz Muhammad Saeed? Will you permit them to continue their anti-India tirades, or will you control them, perhaps even detain them?
Yes.
Which? Control or detain?
Both. If they do not behave, then the second.
All right. What about the numerous so-called terrorist training camps that exist on your side of the Kashmir border and that also exist in the Northwest Frontier Province? Will they be closed down?
I have been told that the terrorist camps have been closed down, but in the event that they're not closed down, they should be closed down, and yes, given the constitutional powers, I would close them down.
As you know,
the reason I mentioned the constitutional powers is because in the past, the President had power over the military, and I was wrongly blamed for acts that were done or attributed to the security forces when I had no constitutional power over them.
That's why this time around you want to be president if possible?
If possible, but
and then you will act?
Yes, but I feel whether it is president or prime minister. In fact, I believe in a parliamentary system, and I believe the prime minister should have the power over the military and the defense forces of the country, and I would prefer to be the prime minister with the executive powers. But I say yes, As the leader of Pakistan and the people of Pakistan, I want my people to prosper. I want them to forever finish
poverty.
poverty.
Training camps will be closed.
Yes.
Expeditiously.
Yes.
There will be no delay.
No.
No prevarication.
No.
No change of mind.
No.
As you know, Tuesday was a terrible day in India. There were a series of terrorist attacks in Srinagar and in Bombay. If you ever become Prime Minister of Pakistan again, will you do your utmost to ensure that such things don't happen in India again at the behest of Pakistani-based groups?
Yes. And I may point out that during my tenure, there were no attacks outside of Kashmir. I may point out that the Bombay blast,
Forgive me, I have to
the
interrupt
attack
you.
on the parliament took place when I was in opposition.
I have to interrupt you given the qualification.
As did the two attacks on the World Trade Towers. They both took place when I was out of office.
Will you ensure that there are no attacks in Kashmir also?
I do believe the Pakistan and India should have safe and open borders, and if there are attacks, there will be no safety. People will not trade, they will not cross,
so there will be no attacks in Kashmir by Pakistani-based groups when you become Prime Minister?
Insofar as Pakistan can influence those groups, yes, because it runs contrary to our vision of South Asia.
Many people in India will want to believe you, but they'll say that this is the sort of thing politicians under pressure in interviews are bound to say. What can you say just now that will convince the government of India and the people of India that you mean what you're saying, that this is not just hot air and rhetoric?
People of India know me, they know my family. They know that we are committed to the Simla Agreement. They know that we are committed to a new vision.
Sounds like
for
rhetoric
all
at
of
the
South
moment.
Asia.
Sounds like rhetoric at the moment.
I don't intend it to sound like rhetoric, but I do intend to say that we have a very clear vision of where South Asia should be going, and we feel that any disruption by militant groups...
You know, in 1999, General Musharraf saluted Mr. Vajpayee in Lahore whilst planning an attack in Kargil. Yeah. Are you sure that this is not something similar? Yes. An assurance for the sake of an assurance?
I am sure it is not something similar. I don't know whether Musharraf saluted Prime Minister Vajpayee at Lahore, but this is certainly a very clear message to the people of India that Pakistan wants to build relations which can see our people prosper.
And no terrorism, full stop.
Yes.
Absolutely no terrorism.
Absolutely. I'm opposed to terrorism. I've been a victim of the groups that practice and support terrorism.
Let me then, in the limited time that we have, come to a third aspect of your Charter of Democracy that is of keen interest in India. I'm talking about Clause 11B, which calls for a commission to fix responsibility for what happened at Kargil. Will that commission focus on the role of General Musharraf as army chief?
Obviously, it will have to look into the people who were responsible.
Including General Musharraf?
All.
But why don't you name him?
Well, I don't want to prejudge an inquiry.
Well, it's not a question of prejudging the inquiry. You see, when you don't name General Musharraf, people say, is this because she's quietly doing a deal with him on the side?
No, I'm not doing any deal with him because I'm suffering. And you always look at motive. You look at people who are not suffering and you know they've done a deal. And you look at people who are suffering, who are facing new attacks every single month, and you know they've done no deal and they're suffering because of that.
All right,
I say this because I believe in principle that matters should be left to a commission. What's your use of a commission if I'm the one who's going to be telling you its details beforehand?
You're being fair. Let's accept you're being fair. Will the same commission also look into the role played by other senior generals, like General Aziz, who was Chief of General Staff, or senior corps commanders like Lieutenant General Mahmood Ahmad and Major General Javed Hassan? Will they also be looked into?
Please read out the relevant clause and you will see that the commission is to put responsibility on all those who are responsible.
But you know,
whether they are known or whether they are unknown, all those who are responsible.
But don't you realize the danger? If you look at all the top army officers from General Musharraf downwards, you could end up antagonizing the army, offending officers and soldiers whose support you need. You could be threatening your own new position.
I don't think that we should start saying that the armed forces should hold the responsibility for the miscalculations of a handful of people.
But the generals should.
That's simply wrong. People join the armed forces of Pakistan to defend their country. People go through very rigorous lifestyles, leaving their families behind because they want to sacrifice their life for the country. But if a handful of people abuse and exploit the armed forces, if they create the mistakes, it doesn't mean that the rest of the armed forces should carry that burden.
All right. My last question on this subject. Will the same commission look into the role and responsibility of the Prime Minister of the time, Nawaz Sharif? After all, he was the Prime Minister. He was the chief executive of the country. The buck stopped with him. Will his role be inquired into?
Mr. Nawaz Sharif himself suggested the wording on that particular clause.
That's not answering my question.
Yes, it is. Mr. Nawaz Sharif himself gave the wording on that particular clause, and he has said repeatedly that he was not involved. He would not
He
have
may
given...
have said so, but very few people believe it. More importantly, when he found out, he did not dismiss the army chief who had in fact broken regulations and rules. He did not even order an immediate withdrawal. So once again, given the critical role he played, will he be inquired into?
I would have only proposed a commission on the Kargil affair if I was the person in power, if I was not involved. And Mr. Sharif says he was not involved.
Are you worried that if you say, yes, Nawaz Sharif will be a subject of that inquiry, your whole relationship with Nawaz Sharif could collapse?
I'm telling you that Mr. Nawaz Sharif has said and dictated that very clause. And when he has dictated that very clause, I'm saying it's a contradiction in terms. That's why I'm saying it's a contradiction in terms to say that Mr. Nawaz Sharif is guilty of Kargil when he himself is proposing the commission.
So you accept Nawaz Sharif's position that he knew nothing, he wasn't briefed,
that he was duped. That's what he says.
You accept that as Prime Minister, he was unaware of what was happening in his own country.
That's what he says.
And you're smiling as you say it.
No, I'm not smiling. And I think you want to spoil my relations with my partners. I want to say Mr. Nawaz Sharif has categorically told me that he did not know about the Kargil affair, and he himself has proposed that commission, and I thank you very much for this interview.
A pleasure talking to you, and thank you very much for speaking to Devil's Advocate.
Thank you.
That was a special interview with Benazir Bhutto, former Prime Minister of Pakistan. Goodbye, good night.